Well, who stores money and lends money? Banks do. Banks lend money to others, and they charge interest in order to do so. Interest is the price of using someone else's money. Interest rates are what the bank charges at a particular point in time in order for you to borrow their money. And in a free market economy, those interest rates will fluctuate on the basis of supply and demand. If the supply of available money stays the same and there's more demand for it from other people, the interest rates will rise. If the money supply stays the same and there's fewer people who want to borrow money, interest rates will drop. That's how the market manages and how important interest rates are in making economic decisions. Interest rates coordinate business decisions over time. How powerful are interest rates? Well, suppose you're a home builder and you get out your pencil and you crunch your numbers and you decide that you can sell a house for 10% more than it costs you to build it. And let's say the bank is willing to loan money to you at 4% interest. Surely you would want to borrow a good amount of money and build a multiple amount of houses because each house represents 6% profit for you. But the same house, the same market, the same demand, the same prices, if it costs you 12% to borrow the money to build the houses, you won't build the houses. It's a loss this way. And of course, if interest rates go even higher, you'll be even further away from considering building houses. I give you the house illustration so we can get our hands around it. But understand, it's not just home builders. It's every businessman making all sorts of business decisions in all sorts of industries, all based on what the interest rate is today. Let's talk a little more about why our money has lost its value. Who controls this? Well, ultimately, it's governments and banks. These two groups are the ones who have most historically sought to manipulate financial markets for their own purposes. And when they get together, they form a central bank. Now, when America was founded, one of the most deeply divided, intense arguments among our founding fathers was on the wisdom of whether or not we should establish a central bank. And the first and second banks in the United States were in fact central banks, but in 1836, their charters were allowed to expire, and the government got out of the establishing of central banks business. It wasn't all the way until 1913, when my grandfather was 10 years old, that the federal government again established a central bank. They established the Federal Reserve banking system. The government gave the monopoly right to create money, as well as to set primary interest rates and other controls over the nation's money supply. Who was behind it? Well, a handful of Wall Street banks and the United States government. They set up a quasi-governmental, quasi-private agency that had absolute control over the nation's money supply. So what happened to the value of the dollar? Well, we need to keep our eyes on the Federal Reserve System and our own history. Because when my grandfather turned 11, World War I began. And soon after, even before we sent our troops, the United States began to get very much involved financially with this war. And this war, like any other war, is very expensive. And over the years, the government poured more and more money into this war. But where does the money come from? Well, to finance a war, a government can borrow money, it can tax more, or if it has its own central bank, it can create new money. It can inflate the money supply. This last option is more popularly known as inflation, which is not merely the increase in prices, but it is the expansion or the inflation of the money supply. And only the Fed can inflate the money supply.